Good morning. My name is Brian Wheeler, Director of Communications for the City of Charlottesville. Welcome to Cville360, a program to inform and engage the Charlottesville community. Cville360 is available on our streaming sites, Comcast Channel 10, and on a companion Zoom webinar so you can tune in live and on demand. The program allows us to engage our community and provide you access to city leaders, especially during this time of the coronavirus pandemic. We use the Zoom webinar so you can join the broadcast and ask questions of our guest. If you want to try the webinar, visit charlottesville.gov/Zoom for the registration information. A link to each show appears at the bottom of the page. When we take questions, we will allow up to 8 people to address our guest. You have up to 3 minutes to ask a question or to make a comment on the topic being discussed. Today's show is a check-in on the state of the 2020 elections with Melissa Morton, Charlottesville's Director of Elections and General Registrar, who will be joining us shortly via Zoom, and Jim Nix of the Charlottesville Electoral Board, who joins us in studio. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Brian. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. I know this is a really busy time, so we appreciate you making time on your schedule. I know we've got a lot of important information to get out there. Melissa, likewise, is busy at the office right now, and I'm going to keep an eye on my screen here, and as soon as she's available, we're going to bring her into the program.
Okay.
So you have said that the November 3rd general election is an election like no other. So let's talk about why that is. And let's start at the high level, then we'll get down into the details. So what's different about this election?
Well, there are many, many changes to the election laws. Some from the general session back in the wintertime, and some from the very recent changes enacted in the special session. So those changes in the law, most of which are to the voters' benefit, and we'll talk about that later, plus the COVID pandemic, have made this an election like no other. And it's a presidential election, and so turnout is way higher than any other election. In our 4-year cycle, this is the big one.
Yep.
So, yep, it's like none before.
And when you say special session, you're referring to the General Assembly,
yes,
who makes the laws, of course, for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so they have a shorter session earlier in the year. They would have made some changes then that go, into effect July 1 or whenever the next election
That's right.
is.
Some changes can take place sooner, but they require being acted on as an emergency measure. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something like an 80% approval has to happen. I mean, it has to be almost unanimous to get immediate action. And that happened actually with this because it was linked to budget changes. And so it happened quickly for us in the recent session.
And the Electoral Board, for those in the community who don't know what that is or what your job is, you've been on the board 7 years. Tell the people a little bit about what you do.
Well, the Electoral Board actually is responsible for running the election, although we all know that the day-to-day work is done by the registrar and the staff in her office. But we're appointed by the judges of the 16th Circuit using nominations from the political parties. And so there are 3 of us on the board. Every jurisdiction in Virginia, all 133 of them, have a 3-person board. I can't imagine how the people in Fairfax with 3 people manage 750,000 voters. we have 32,000 voters in Charlottesville, and we stay busy in years like this. But we're appointed to manage the elections, and of course we hire and rate the registrar, and then she is responsible for all the other staff in the office.
And of course, we work very closely with Melissa Morton as a city staff member, but it is a little unusual. This is not a board that City Council appoints, as you said. These are judicial appointments, and then you hire your own staff.
Yeah, we hire the registrar, and then she hires the rest of the staff.
Right.
She, in this case, because it's Melissa.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the Electoral Board is it's very difficult to remove a board member. This has come up in recent years, and we don't need to go into all that. But the only way a board member can be removed is if someone petitions, if a majority of the state board petitions the local judge to remove someone, and then it's still up to the judge. But no local action, especially by political parties. And the reason for it is to insulate the board from any political influence.
Okay.
Even though we are appointed by the parties, and nominated by the parties. So it's an interesting situation.
Well, this Friday is a key date on the election calendar. So what can voters expect beginning Friday, September 18th?
Well, Friday is really big. That's the start of the early voting season. And it's also the day that we mail out the first of the mail ballots. And people have been getting the word on voting early, either in person or by mail. We already had, as of yesterday morning, about 6,500 requests for ballots by mail, which is astounding.
Wow.
I mean, normally in a presidential year, we'd have fewer than 2,000 for the whole cycle.
Yep.
And here, before it even starts, we have 6,500, and they're pouring in every day. We expect by Friday to mail out 8,000 or so, perhaps even more, which is truly amazing.
And at this point, nobody has technically voted in this race.
Not until Friday.
Not
and then,
until
of
Friday.
course, at 8:30 Friday morning is when early voting starts. That's in-person voting.
Okay.
So anyone who wants to vote, starting Friday morning at 8:30, can just come to the office and vote as you would on Election Day. And you don't need a reason. Just show up and vote early. It's every weekday from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. But the final 2 Saturdays, we're also open.
In October.
In October, yeah, the final 2 before the election.
And so how is that in-person voting early? Is that different from previous elections?
Well, yeah, I mean, we always use the term absentee voting. And to be honest, even though the new law uses that term, absentee voting is gone. We now have voting by mail and we have early voting. And the big difference is you don't need a reason to do it. Anyone who has already made up their mind on who they're voting for can vote by mail. Just request a ballot, and there are many different ways to get one. Or you come to the office and vote in person. So that's a really huge difference.
So now that you said absentee voting is no more.
Yeah.
Now, you used to call one of the precincts the absentee precinct.
It is still.
Is that still going to stay, that
The
name?
official title is still CAP, as we call it, Central Absentee Precinct.
Okay.
So, and the absentee ballots actually say absentee on the top. So,
Interesting.
So it's a bit of confusion that was left to us by the legislature.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, you don't need a reason. And the other big change, and this is huge, previously all those ballots by mail had to be received in the office by 7 p.m. on Election Day. And now for the first time, as long as they're postmarked on Election Day and no later than Election Day, we can still count them if we receive them until noon on Friday. So in this case, it'll be the 6th of November, noon. So if it's postmarked on Tuesday or earlier, and we get it by noon on Friday, it'll still be counted.
Now, I know I've got some questions about the implications of that and the mail system, but I want to make sure our viewers understand they can also ask a question. So if you have a question for Jim Nix of the Electoral Board, you can click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar, and we will call on folks in the order in which they've raised their hands. And we do not have the Q&A module any longer, so there's not a place where you can type in a question, although my staff is certainly watching social media, if you're watching via Facebook, for any questions that may come along via that platform. So we're definitely watching those comments, but it's harder to get them into the program. So again, we'll make sure that everyone knows these opportunities exist throughout the program. Just click that raise hand icon, and we'll bring you right in to ask a question. So we were talking about the mail voting, and so you said the postmark is what's important about whether the ballot's going to count or not. Now, what's the level of concern, I guess, in the Electoral Board about the U.S. Postal Service right now?
Well, we've all experienced delays in mail. I mean, I have many friends, and we certainly have at my house noticed delays, and so. And these delays were noted by the legislature. So back in January or February, when they passed some new laws, one of the changes was to change the deadline for requesting a ballot by mail. Previously, it had been 7 days before the election. Now it's 11. But we all got mailings from the post office that suggested we post our mail ballots as early as possible and don't wait till the last minute. And definitely not. Don't mail them any later than 7 days before. So we have some concerns. About the postmark issue, one of the concerns that has been expressed widely is the post office doesn't postmark everything. Some mail is just delivered without ever being postmarked. But we know that mail with a first-class stamp on it will almost always be postmarked. And so the new law requires that we pay the return postage for all ballots by mail. We pay both ways. You know, we pay to mail it and pay to return it. But we actually do it by putting a stamp on each return envelope. That ensures that that when the post office is sending it back, they actually postmark all those envelopes.
Interesting.
Now,
so you're not required to do that?
No, that's something.
That's a local decision.
That's a local decision. We decided to put stamps on them, which is a little extra labor.
Yeah. So
we've had people working from home during the COVID problem, and they've been putting stamps on all those thousands of envelopes.
Well, at least they're not having to lick them these days, right?
No, they're all self-stick. But that's a really important thing, and we think it'll help us. Can't guarantee we can read the postmarks, but at least they'll be there.
Well, that's great. That's good to hear. So when people show up at the polls and they need to have identification, is there anything new on that front that we need to share?
Huge changes to the ID law. Formerly, you needed to have a photo ID. Now there's no requirement for a photo ID, and many other forms of identification are acceptable. For example, you can use a utility bill that shows your name and address, a paycheck that has your name and address. Any government document that shows your name and address will work. It doesn't have to have a photograph. But if you don't even have that when you show up, if you forget your wallet, you have nothing with you when you come to vote, there's one final option, and that is to sign an affirmation of identity. This is a new form that the state has provided. And if you attest that you are the person you say you are, and that the address is the one that's your address, and that's where you're registered to vote, and you sign that under penalty of law. I mean, it's a serious penalty if you falsify that document. Then you can vote without any ID at all. And I don't think that's widely known. But we certainly recommend that people still bring their driver's license and other photo IDs they've used before. It's absolutely the easiest and quickest way. We have scanners that can read the barcodes, and we'll get the right person every time, and we'll do it quickly if they bring those.
That's great. So what else are you doing to prepare with the pandemic in mind to keep the precincts safe for the voters and the workers?
Well, fortunately, we had a good practice in June. We had a relatively high turnout for the June 23rd primary, and so the precautions we instituted then we'll be using again and even amplifying them. What we did then was ask that all voters wear masks, and we'll provide masks for those who show up without one. We'll also have hand sanitizer available everywhere. The election officials will be working behind plexiglass screens, just like you find in the supermarkets now. They'll also be wearing face shields and masks.
And what's the nature of the device these days that a city voter would be interacting with?
Well, actually, there really isn't any need to touch the election equipment at all, unless you're a voter using what we call the touch writer. The touch writer is a device, for a ballot marking device used by those who have difficulty in marking a ballot by hand. But that's a relatively small percentage. All the others will be given a ballot, and they mark the ballot and put the ballot into the scanner without actually touching the scanner.
Right.
Now, if they make a mistake and vote for two candidates for the same office, then the scanner will alert them and kick the ballot back out. They still have the option of voting that ballot, but that'll require that they touch the screen. And that's the only time any voter will need to touch the scanner. And
that's an interesting piece of trivia that I didn't know, that you do get sort of an immediate do-over if you need to.
Yeah, if you make a mistake.
If you make a mistake.
But it's uncommon, but it does happen. And if you really do just want to vote for one and not have your vote tossed and not used at all, then we'll give you another ballot. But that's the only time you'd ever have to touch the scanner. So the place that is a potential source of contagion is the ballot marking stations. You know, the tables all around the room where voters mark their ballots. They will be touching the surfaces, and so we'll be cleaning them after each voter. That's our goal. We're going to really push that in the training. And then the pen you use, if you don't have your own pen, we'll give you one, and then you can either keep it or put it in a box for us to sanitize for use in a future election.
That's great.
And we're keeping people spaced apart. You know, the 6-foot rule will be applied. And we're also limiting the number of people inside the polls at any one time. we had a blanket rule of 4 voters at a time in each precinct, and I believe we'll continue with that, although there's still time to discuss that. It's certainly a big difference between the space available in the gym at Walker and the space available in the Tonsler voting precinct, for example. But it's best to just keep everybody outside until allow only a few in at a time. So with all those precautions, I think we should have a safe election for those who show up in person. And we'll be doing similar things for those who come to the office to vote early in person.
Yep. Well, I know you've been very thoughtful about that. You've had to do a lot of training of all the people who will be working and volunteering at the polls. So we appreciate them being involved in our democracy in this way as well. I know they don't get paid handsomely for this.
They get paid, but no, I'm we had to raise some of the salaries actually to meet the city's minimum salary requirements.
All right, good to know. So if you have a question for Jim Nix, you can click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar, and we'll get you on the program and you can ask your question directly. At this point, we don't have any hands up, so I want to put on the screen a list of key dates that we've got coming up. Again, we're talking about the general election, which is November 3rd. The deadline to register online to vote is Tuesday, October 13th. The deadline for registering by mail to vote is also Tuesday, October 13th. The deadline to register in person to vote is Tuesday, October 13th. So October 13th is a big day. Later in October, the deadline to request a ballot by mail is, we have to receive that by Friday, October 23rd. And then the early voting period, which we mentioned, which begins this Friday, September 18th, runs until Saturday, October 31st. So Saturday, October 31st is one of those Saturdays where we will be open for business and accepting those early ballots. So in general, for the procrastinators out there, what do you want to tell them about this election cycle?
Well, one of the things that has changed in a huge way this time is that there are more options for returning those ballots that you receive by mail. You can, of course, return them by mail in the usual way, and recommend strongly that you do that as soon as possible once you've made up your mind. You can also hand deliver the ballot. Now, that has always been an option, to hand deliver it to the office. But the law says that you may only hand deliver your own ballot. But now we have something new, and that's a drop box that'll be outside the office. So, you know, obviously that rule won't work for the drop box. So if you can, you know, anyone can return a ballot outside, and it doesn't necessarily have to be their own. But inside, if you're handing it over, it has to be your own ballot. Now,
so let me make sure I got that straight. So in the drop box, that would be a new thing outside.
Outside, yes.
And this hasn't been set up yet, but it will be shortly.
This week. By the end of this week, it should be there. Yeah.
So you could deliver your spouse's ballot along with your own, put it into that drop box if you're just doing a drive-by.
Right.
But if you walk into the office, you can only personally deliver your own.
That's right. Because there is a conflict in the two laws are in conflict, so we decided the best way around it is to stick with the letter of the law on returning inside. Now, about the drop boxes, those will be available right up until 7 p.m. on Election Day. That one outside the registrar's office. But it will be locked at 7 o'clock because you can't mark your ballot after 7 p.m. and have it counted. Remember, you can, if it's by mail, it can be postmarked by that time and still counted later. But if you're delivering it, you've got to do it by 7 p.m. on election night. Now, on Election Day, there's another big change to the law, and that is that there'll be a drop box for absentee ballots at every polling place. And the detailed mechanics of that have not been developed yet. We're still working on that because we have some time on that. But if you have not returned your absentee ballot and you want to, you can just bring it to the polling place and drop it in a box there. And you can bring it to any of the polling places in the city. And that's a really important point, also with regard to the drop box. That's only for city voters. The county will have its own drop box at their registrar's office on 5th Street South. So for county voters, you've got to return your ballot there. City voters must return it in the city.
I know one thing we're going to make clear at City Hall is that some of the payment drop boxes have signage that says, you know, do not put your ballots here. We want to make sure they put them in the right place over near the registrar's office, which is on that little loop next to City Hall over in the City Hall Annex.
Right.
And this is going to look like basically a repurposed postal drop box.
I haven't seen it yet, but
Yeah.
that's the way Melissa described it.
That's the way it's being
It's,
described.
one of those big old heavy-duty blue mailboxes. It's now going to be for dropping off ballots.
Excellent. So with all these additional options that voters have, I could see a lot of people requesting a ballot to participate by mail ahead of time. But what if then they decide, you know what, I really want to go in and, get the full experience, go to my precinct, see the precinct workers I see every election and participate that way and watch my ballot go into the scanner. What do they do with that ballot they received from your office?
Well, really there is no change from previous elections in that regard. So you always have had the ability to bring that ballot to the polling place, your regular polling place, and turn that one in and receive in place of it a regular precinct ballot. And then,
so you would turn that over to the poll workers
right.
and say, I'm not going to use this one.
Right. And
Okay.
there's some steps they have to do in the poll book to remove you as an absentee voter and put you in as an in-person voter
Okay.
on election day. But it's fairly simple. It just takes a little time. If you don't have the ballot, if you've lost it, or if it never arrived, and you're panicking, I never got my ballot, you can come to the regular polling place on election day, and you'll be in the poll book as having been sent an absentee ballot, but we'll allow you to vote a provisional ballot then.
Okay.
And that provisional ballot will automatically count on Friday at noon if we never receive your absentee ballot in the mail. I mean, I say automatic. It requires a decision by the board, but we always approve the provisional ballots for people who received an absentee ballot and then never sent it in.
Yep. Well, as we're waiting for Melissa Morton to join the program, let's talk about the ballot. I downloaded the sample ballot off the city's website. So this is at charlottesville.gov/vote. And just so everyone knows, we will be voting for president and vice president. And the Libertarian Party is also on the ballot this cycle. So you've got Democratic, Republican, and Libertarian candidates for president and vice president. We've got one of our U.S. Senate seats is up. The incumbent is Mark Warner, and he has a challenger this year, so that race is on the ballot. And then we have an open race in the 5th District for House of Representatives, which is a really big district that goes all the way from, here and places north, all the way down to the North Carolina line in Danville. And we have 2 folks in that race. And then, of course, people can write in. So how does it work locally for the write-in votes?
Well, I have to mention that the ballot is two-sided, don't forget. And on the back, there are 2 constitutional
Let's
amendments.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes, I have the other side.
Yeah,
Please plug the constitutional
yeah,
amendments.
absolutely. Those are important and require voters' attention as well. So
What will they be looking at?
the first one has to do with the way we redistrict. Yeah, and the second one is a further modification of the options for those for some exemptions from local taxes for, I think, first responders who've died.
Yep, and it mentions veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces, National Guard, and this gives them for their automobile or pickup truck. I guess they're free from state and local taxes.
Personal property taxes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So definitely important to read up on those. You can get this sample ballot and this language by going to charlottesville.gov/vote and check that out. And those constitutional amendments, oftentimes, as I remember, they have to be on there sometimes twice, right? But
No, they have to be passed twice by the legislature.
twice by the legislature.
Yeah.
Once by the public.
They pass twice in exactly the same wording, and then they're voted on by the voters. There are brochures available in the office, or they will be once we receive them. I think we're getting 30,000 plus, and those have further explanation of the constitutional amendments and what voting yes and what voting no means for those. You asked about write-in.
Yeah.
A very important thing about write-in is that you must check the box that says write-in before you write in a name. If you don't check the box, the scanner won't realize that you intend to cast a write-in ballot. And so it's important to mark the box and then write in the name.
With good handwriting.
Yes, because we have to actually look at each one of those. We look at images rather than the original ballots, but the scanner takes a full image, a scan of the ballot, and so we try to read them. And we did have a race decided for Soil and Water Conservation Board in the last election. That was by write-in, so it sometimes happens that way.
So we've got Melissa Morton now, and let's bring her on the screen. Melissa, we want to move your camera a little bit so that your head is closer to the top. Otherwise, we might lose you at the bottom. There we go. Can you hear us, Melissa? And you're muted, I think, so we need to...
Yes, sir, I can.
All right, great. Welcome to the program. We're glad you could join us. And want to check with my technical team and make sure we've got the picture we're looking for. Does that look good, David? All right. So, Melissa, I assume you've been listening to at least the last several minutes, but we want to make sure you can introduce yourself here and tell us the work you and your team are engaged with right now.
My name is Melissa Morton. I'm the City of Charlottesville Director of Elections and General Registrar. Currently, my team is processing and preparing the absentee mail ballots to go out on this Friday, September the 18th. So we have approximately about 9,000 mail ballots that will go out. It is taking a lot of work.
And Jim was saying that's a lot more than previous elections.
A lot more. He is correct.
So tell us about some of the other things you're having to address with your staff as you prepare to get all our precincts ready and for this early voting that begins this Friday.
We're basically making sure that we have enough PPEs for ourselves and for the voters. We are constantly and continuously processing all of the the vote by mail applications. We are scheduled later this week to put down the social distancing signage for inside and outside the building. And the drop box should be here next week. Should be here this week, I'm sorry.
And that's going to be installed outside your office?
Yes, sir. We're going to have one for the city that's going to be installed outside of our front door at the City Hall Annex building.
Great. Well, we do have a question from the audience right now, and I'm going to bring in Robin Hoffman. Robin, you're on with the Cville360 team here. Can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Ms. Morton, thank you so much for helping me. I'm like dyslexic, and every time I sent the request, you said, no, you need to do this. So thank you very much for being very meticulous. But also, I realized, because I'm home now, I'm 64, and I'm trying to get employment, and every service and every educator and everybody is babysitting. I mean, the kids are home. So even if you're a social worker or whatever you do, you're getting the calls from home because of the COVID. And I'm thinking, like, for the election thing, like, how are you going to have enough people to be able to leave their home with the kids? Like, this is unprecedented. Do we actually know how you're going to be able to work the polls and the ballots and all that with not only the post office issues, but then you have babysitting issues. So, it's like crazy. So did you have any considerations about that?
Thank you, Robin, for that question. So Melissa, how is the staffing looking for your poll workers? Has that been harder this year or easier?
Easier. We've had a very high demand of people requesting to be election officers. We have actually stopped accepting applications at this time. We are well stocked for this election here in our office and at the polls.
That's great. And if you're in the audience and you have a question, feel free to click the raise hand icon and we'll bring you onto the program. And you can ask a question directly of either Jim Nix or Melissa Morton. Melissa, we put up a picture of some of the deadlines coming up. We're going to put that up on the screen again and make sure that we're not leaving anything out that you think is important. but we've got some of the deadlines for registering, whether it's online, by mail, or in person. We've got the deadline for requesting a ballot by mail, Friday, October 23rd. And then, of course, early voting runs through this Friday through Saturday, October 31st. Is there anything else, Melissa, you want to make sure the public knows about deadlines?
No, I think you have them all up there.
Good. Well, my team did a good job then.
Yes, it did.
Let's talk with both of you about the election night, because we haven't hit that issue yet. So I know that, you know, many times Charlottesville has been very proud that we quickly get through all the business that it takes, and we're quickly able to share with the community at least the local results of our elections. Is that going to change this year?
Well, the big change for us this year, of course, is the huge volume of ballots received by mail. But the state law has given us flexibility on that we didn't really appreciate until this year. And it's been there for a while, since 2007. We have the authorization to do pre-processing of those ballots that come by mail. And a careful reading of the statute convinced us in June that we can actually take that pre-processing all the way to the point of scanning the ballots, but not tallying the scanner. And so that's what we did in June in the weeks leading up to the election. And so even though we had a very high volume, not as high as we're going to have this time, but still a very high volume of mail ballots, we were able to get them all counted by election night. So we're going to do the same thing. We're starting on the 16th of October, and we'll do it a number of days, depending on how many we have. But probably, I think we've got about 8 days scheduled now for pre-processing, and we'll invite representatives from the political parties in to observe this process to make sure everything's on the up and up. But that should allow us to report normally on election night. Now, don't forget, we will be counting ballots that arrive after Election Day, the ones that are postmarked by Election Day and come in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And our plans for dealing with those are incomplete. Maybe Melissa can give us more information. But my understanding is that we'll be reporting those each day, the ones that come in each day.
After the election?
After the election, yeah.
Melissa, anything you want to add on that topic?
We will be posting our precinct unofficial results on Election Day, as we always have, but the central absentee numbers will not be available until probably Friday night or so, but we will be posting our unofficial numbers.
Great. And the, you know, we're hearing warnings from, you know, secretaries of state, you know, around the country saying everyone just needs to relax and, you know, be prepared to not have maybe the results of the presidential race. But what I hear you guys saying is that locally you're going to be able to do some work up front, and that we should be able to pretty efficiently move through, you know, the majority of the ballots that we receive.
Yeah, our hope is to be able to provide the results from the great bulk of the absentee votes along with the 9 precinct tallies on election night, but there will be more coming in after election night that have to be counted.
Great. I think, Melissa, we've gone over things like where people can get the sample ballot that's on your website. What other kinds of information can voters learn from the city's website and your information there?
They can learn where to track their ballot. Once they put it in the mail, there's a ballot scout tracking system, and they can track their ballots all the way up until it gets here to our office, and we scan it in. It talks about early voting, how you can request a vote by mail application form, as well as getting a registration application.
Great. And for students who are joining our community, maybe they're a first-year student at the university, they're going to be here 4 years. How does the, you know, if they've lived in another location, how can they switch, and do many of them switch to vote here? How does that work?
They just have to fill out or update their voter registration form to give their current resident address here in the city, and then we process it and send them their approval letter or denial letter, depends on if we need additional information. Also, because of COVID, I just want to let the UVA student community know that if you are going to go back home, or if you're going to change your residency address to another location, say for instance, if the university shuts down and you have to go home, you're going to have to update your vote by mail application if you're not at that address.
Okay, good. We'll come back to the studio here, and Jim, I think we've covered everything that was on my list. Is there anything else you want to add to make sure we share with the public?
Yeah, there's one more important thing, an important change in the law, a very recent one, and that concerns errors on votes by mail, ballots by mail. I'm sad to report that in June, before the new law went into effect, we had about 400 ballots received after Election Day, and we couldn't do anything with them. We weren't able to count them because they arrived late. The law that was in effect at that time did not allow us to count any ballots that came after Election Day.
Okay.
That law has been changed, and now any ballot that arrives in the last 3 days can be counted. But also, if people make mistakes, they've removed the requirement for this election to have a witness for an absentee ballot or a ballot by mail. But even with the witness requirement gone, there still are a few things that trip voters up. Sometimes they forget to sign the envelope, and that's absolutely required. Or occasionally there's a discrepancy in the address. It doesn't exactly match the registration address. Previously, those were just tossed. We couldn't do anything about it. But the new law allows us to, in fact, it requires us to notify the voter within 3 days of receipt of the ballot that there's a mistake, and offer them an option to come in and correct the mistake. You know, if they've forgotten to sign it, they can come in and sign it, for example. Now, the deadline for that is the 31st of October. So any ballot we receive by the 31st of October, we can notify the voters, and they have the option to come in, and they have to come in by Election Day. That doesn't wait till Friday. They've got to come in by 7 p.m. on Election Day to fix the problem. But this is a really important change that hopefully will get rid of a lot of rejected ballots. We had, I believe it was 87 ballots rejected because of mistakes, in addition to the ones that arrived late. So it's something approaching 2%, which is too high. We need to fix that.
Right.
And now the law has given us a tool to do that. But there's an important thing. We have to be able to contact you. And you know, if you don't give us an email address or telephone number on your vote by mail application form, then we'll have to rely on the post office to send you a letter saying, we got your ballot, but there's a fault. Can you come in? And so that makes it tougher to get it done in time if it's a ballot fairly late in the cycle. But the option to be able to correct mistakes that voters make, I think is a positive thing. It makes headaches for us, means we have to open every absentee ballot that we receive within 3 days, inspect it for mistakes, and then notify the voters, so that it's going to be more of a burden on the office, but it should work to the benefit of some voters.
Great. And Melissa, it sounds like you're going to be really busy, as you are with every election, but given all this work you'll be doing in October and then after the election as well, to make sure that all these ballots are counted accurately. You know, one, thank you for you and your team and the work you're going to be doing. Anything else you'd like to add?
If anybody has any questions about how to fill out the vote by mail application, or just have any election questions in general, please call our office. We're here to answer any questions and to make sure that every vote counts. So please call our office with any questions.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank both Jim and Melissa for joining us today. We really appreciate the information. It's exciting to see that the legislation and how that's being rolled out and changing your work, and we appreciate everything you're doing.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to come in. There's a lot of things changed, and we're happy to have an opportunity to inform the voters.
All right. Well, thank you for watching this edition of Cville360. If you have ideas about guests and information for future topics, please let me know. And as always, we hope you stay healthy out there during this coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for watching.